The morning sun slanted through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and casting a warm, honeyed glow across our polished granite countertops. It was the kind of idyllic, picture-perfect morning that graced the covers of home and garden magazines. From the outside, our life was a meticulously curated masterpiece. My name is Eleanor Conway, I'm 39 years old, and for 12 of those years, I believed I was living in a solid, unshakable marriage. My husband, Stephen, was a corporate attorney here in Sacramento, California, a partner at Crimson Harbor Group, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. He was the kind of man who commanded a room without raising his voice, his confidence a quiet, unyielding force. We had 2 beautiful children, Maya, our thoughtful 10-year-old with an artist's soul, and Connor, our boisterous 8-year-old who lived and breathed soccer. To anyone looking in, we were the perfect family, the embodiment of the suburban dream. I managed our sprawling Tudor-style home, a sanctuary of manicured lawns and cozy reading nooks, while freelancing as a marketing consultant, a career that allowed me the flexibility to be present for every school play and soccer game. That morning, I stood in the kitchen doorway, a steaming mug of coffee halfway to my lips, the rich aroma of dark roast filling my senses. The house was quiet, the kids already at school. Stephen was in his home office down the hall, on a call. He'd started taking more calls from home lately, even on days he was supposed to be in the office. I didn't think much of it, just another symptom of his demanding career. But this time, he'd left the speakerphone on. His voice, usually so measured and professional, drifted down the hallway, casual and confident. "She's too trusting to notice," Stephen said, and a cold dread began to seep into my bones, chilling me far more than the morning air. I froze, my hand trembling so violently that hot coffee sloshed over the rim of my mug, scalding my fingers. I barely felt the pain. "I'll paint her as unstable and get full custody," he continued, his tone as detached as if he were discussing a legal strategy for a client. "The plan is already in motion. Don't worry, Mark. By Christmas, this will all be over." Mark. His brother. My coffee mug slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed in the sudden, deafening silence from the office. I didn't move. I couldn't. Each word he had spoken was a shard of ice piercing my heart, shattering the beautiful, fragile illusion of my life. 12 years. 12 years of shared dreams, of raising children, of building a home. And it was all a lie. The plan is already in motion. By Christmas, this will all be over. The words replayed in my head, a cruel, relentless loop. My name is Eleanor Conway, I'm 39 years old, and for 12 years, I had believed I was living in a solid marriage with my husband, Stephen. Now, standing there amidst the shards of my favorite mug and the puddle of cooling coffee, I knew I was living with a stranger. A monster. But standing there in my own kitchen, listening to my husband discuss my destruction like a legal strategy, I realized how wrong I'd been about everything. The late nights at the office, the weekend conferences that seemed to multiply recently, the way he'd started looking at me, like I was a stranger. It all suddenly made horrifying sense. The late nights he claimed were for crunching deadlines on a big case. The weekend conferences in San Francisco and Lake Tahoe. The way his eyes would skim over me during dinner, his attention glued to the glowing screen of his phone. I had dismissed it all as the stress of a high-powered job, the burden of a man providing for his family. I had made excuses for his distance, for his lack of affection, for the slow, creeping coldness that had settled between us. I had told myself that all long-term marriages went through phases, that the passion would return once the latest merger was complete, once the kids were a little older. What a fool I had been. What Stephen didn't know was that I was never as naive as he thought. In fact, I'd been watching him more carefully than he realized. For months, I'd noticed the small changes. Stephen used to text me when he'd be late, a simple running behind, save me some dinner, that let me know he was thinking of me. But lately, he just assumed I'd wait. He used to ask about my day, about my consulting projects, about the funny thing Connor said at the park. But now, He barely looked up from his phone during dinner, his thumbs moving silently across the screen. Most telling of all, he'd started talking about Maya and Connor's future in ways that didn't include me. When the kids are older, they'll understand why Daddy had to make difficult choices, he'd said just last week, a strange, sanctimonious look on his face. At the time, the phrasing had sent a shiver of unease down my spine. It felt rehearsed, performative. Now, I understood. Those difficult choices were his premeditated steps to erase me from our children's lives. The casual cruelty in his voice as he discussed stealing my children made my hands shake with a fury so intense it threatened to consume me. But even as rage flooded through me, a cold, calculating part of my mind was already working. Stephen thought he was the only strategic thinker in this marriage. He had always treated me with a sort of fond condescension, the brilliant lawyer and his charming, slightly scattered, creative wife. He was about to learn otherwise. He was about to learn that hell hath no fury like a mother protecting her children. I set down my coffee mug with deliberate care and walked quietly back to my office. The first tear escaped, then another, hot tracks of betrayal on my cheeks. I let them fall for a moment, a brief, silent eulogy for the man I thought I had married and the life I thought we had. Then, I wiped them away. There would be time for grief later. Now was the time for war. Opening my laptop, I created a new folder on my desktop and labeled it simply, Evidence. Then I picked up my phone and started researching private investigators in Sacramento. Stephen wanted to play games with our family's future. He had no idea what he just started. The next morning, I sat across from Detective James Morrison in a small cafe downtown, choosing a location far from Stephen's usual haunts. Detective Morrison was in his 50s, with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to catch every detail. He'd come highly recommended by a colleague whose own divorce had revealed her husband's affair. "Tell me what's happening," Detective Morrison said, pulling out a small notepad. His voice was calm, reassuring. I took a deep breath and explained the conversation I'd overheard, the changes in Stephen's behavior, and my growing suspicions about his secretary, Vanessa Torres. She was 26, fresh out of paralegal school, and had started working at Crimson Harbor Group about 8 months ago, right around the time Stephen's behavior began shifting. "Do you have any concrete evidence of an affair?" Detective Morrison asked. "Not yet," I admitted. "But I have a feeling there's more going on than just infidelity. Stephen mentioned moving money and painting me as unstable. He's been working on this plan for over a year, according to what I heard." Detective Morrison nodded grimly. "Financial manipulation in divorce cases is more common than people think. If your husband is planning to claim you're unfit, he's probably building a paper trail to support that narrative. We need to document everything before he can execute his plan." That conversation was the beginning of my new reality. I lived a double life. To Stephen and the children, I was the same loving, slightly frazzled wife and mother. I made their favorite meals, helped with homework, and smiled through family dinners where Stephen would recount fabricated stories about his long days at the office. I listened patiently, my heart a block of ice, as he laid the groundwork for his betrayal, making casual comments about my forgetfulness or my anxiety. Meanwhile, every moment I had to myself was dedicated to the investigation. I meticulously documented every interaction, every late night, every strange phone call. I became a master of subterfuge, a spy in my own home. I learned to read the subtle shifts in his mood, the flicker of guilt in his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. 3 weeks into my secret investigation, Detective Morrison called with the first major breakthrough. "We've got hotel receipts," he said, his voice tight with professional excitement. "Your husband has been staying at the Fairmont Hotel downtown every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 2 months. The reservations are in his name, but there's a pattern of room service for 2. A few days later, he had more. We have him on security footage. He's with a young woman matching Vanessa Torres's description." The confirmation of the affair was a sharp, painful blow, but it was also a validation. I wasn't going crazy. My instincts had been right. The evidence kept piling up. Detective Morrison, with the help of a forensic accountant, uncovered a web of deceit that was far more sinister than a simple affair. He's moved almost $200,000, Detective Morrison told me over a crackling phone line. 3 separate offshore accounts opened over the past 14 months. He's been systematically transferring money from your joint savings and his business account. $200,000. Money we'd saved for the children's college funds, for our retirement, for the family vacations we'd never take. Stephen had been stealing from his own family while planning to take my children away from me. Then came the most chilling discovery of all. He's been meeting with a psychiatrist, Dr. Patricia Webb, Detective Morrison revealed. She specializes in custody evaluations. The meetings aren't documented as official consultations, which suggests he's been coaching her on what to look for when she eventually evaluates you. The scope of his deception was breathtaking. He had been planning this for over a year, methodically building a case against me while I'd been living my life completely unaware. But Detective Morrison wasn't finished. "Eleanor," he said, his voice unusually grave, "we've uncovered something that changes everything. Stephen hasn't just been moving money. He's been working with someone at his firm to manipulate his income reporting." My blood ran cold. "What do you mean?" "He's been artificially reducing his documented salary and bonuses to minimize potential alimony payments. But here's the interesting part. The money he's been hiding isn't going into personal accounts. It's being funneled through a complex series of transfers that suggest money laundering." I sat down hard on the basement steps, surrounded by Christmas wrapping paper and ribbon. Money laundering. Stephen. It gets worse. Some of the client accounts he's been managing show irregularities that suggest he's been skimming funds. We're talking about serious criminal activity, Eleanor. This isn't just about your divorce anymore. The implications hit me like a physical blow. If Stephen was embezzling client funds, his career wasn't just at risk, his freedom was. And if he was caught, Maya and Connor would have to live with the shame of having a father in prison. The revelation about Stephen's criminal activity changed everything about my strategy. Detective Morrison introduced me to Catherine Walsh, a criminal defense attorney who specialized in white-collar crime. Catherine was in her 40s with steel-gray hair and an intensity that made me feel safer just being in her presence. "Your husband has been incredibly sloppy," Catherine said, reviewing the financial documents Detective Morrison had gathered. "He's left a paper trail that any forensic accountant could follow. The question is whether he's acting alone or if others at his firm are involved." We decided to wait. "Let him think he's winning," Detective Morrison advised. "The more confident he gets, the more mistakes he'll make." And he did. His confidence was indeed growing. He'd started leaving his phone unlocked around the house, apparently secure in the belief that I was too naive to check it. During one of his weekend conferences, I photographed dozens of text messages between him and Vanessa. The conversations ranged from sickeningly romantic to coldly strategic discussions about our divorce timeline. "By February, Eleanor will be out of the picture," Stephen had texted Vanessa just 3 days ago. "The kids will adjust quickly, and we can start fresh." Vanessa had responded with heart emojis and a message that made my stomach turn. "I can't wait to be their new mom. I'll be so much better for them than she ever was." The audacity was breathtaking. This woman, who'd never changed a diaper or sat through a school conference or held a sick child through the night, thought she could simply replace me in my children's lives. But her arrogance was also useful. Detective Morrison explained that family courts looked very unfavorably on parents who brought their affair partners into custody discussions before the divorce was even filed. On January 15, exactly 3 months after I'd first contacted Detective Morrison, everything came to a head in a way that even my darkest fantasies couldn't have imagined. I was at home with the children when my phone rang. Catherine Walsh's name appeared on the screen, and my heart immediately began racing. "Eleanor, it's happening today," Catherine said without preamble. The FBI is moving on Stephen and several others at his firm within the hour. Are you somewhere safe with the children? I looked around our living room, where Maya was working on a puzzle and Connor was reading a book about dinosaurs. Safe seemed like a relative term when your husband was about to be arrested for federal crimes. We're at home, I said. Should we leave? No, stay put. The agents will likely come to the house to search for evidence, but you and the children aren't in any danger. This is actually the best-case scenario for you. Stephen will be processed and arraigned, which means he won't be able to come home and potentially destroy evidence or intimidate you. As if on cue, I heard the sound of multiple cars pulling into our driveway. Through the front window, I could see black SUVs and unmarked sedans filling our normally quiet street. Maya looked up from her puzzle with curiosity. "Mommy, why are there so many cars outside?" she asked. I took a deep breath, knowing that this moment would change my children's lives forever. "There are some police officers who need to ask Daddy some questions about his work," I said carefully. "It's going to be okay, but things might be a little confusing for a while." The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find two FBI agents with a search warrant. They were professional and courteous, explaining that they needed to examine Stephen's home office and any financial documents. As they worked, I called my mother and asked her to come pick up Maya and Connor. There was no point in having them witness their home being searched by federal agents. Within an hour, the agents had filled several boxes with documents from Stephen's office. They also seized his laptop and a filing cabinet full of what they called relevant materials. As they prepared to leave, one of the agents handed me a business card. "Mrs. Conway, your husband has been arrested on charges of embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering," she said. "He's being held pending arraignment, which will likely happen on Monday. You'll want to contact an attorney if you haven't already." I held the card with steady hands, though inside, I felt like I was floating outside my own body. The arraignment hearing was scheduled for Monday morning, and Catherine Walsh had arranged for me to attend as an observer. I wanted to see Stephen's face when he realized how completely his world had collapsed. The courthouse was buzzing with reporters and curious onlookers. Stephen's arrest had become a major story in Sacramento. A prominent attorney brought down by his own greed made for compelling headlines. As I sat in the gallery with Catherine, I spotted several of Stephen's colleagues from Crimson Harbor Group, looking shell-shocked and worried about their own potential involvement. When Stephen was let in, wearing handcuffs and jail-issued clothing, he looked like a completely different person from the confident man who'd planned to paint me as unstable. His hair was disheveled, his face pale, and his eyes darted nervously around the courtroom. When his gaze found mine, I saw something I'd never seen before: genuine fear. The charges were read aloud: embezzlement of client funds totaling $450,000, wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Each count carried potential prison sentences that added up to decades behind bars. Vanessa Torres stood at a separate podium, facing identical charges. Her designer suit was a stark contrast to the gravity of her situation. When the judge asked about bail, the prosecutor argued that both defendants were flight risks, given the evidence of offshore accounts and hidden assets. Bail was set at $2 million each, an amount that Stephen's frozen assets couldn't cover. As Stephen was led away, he turned back one more time to look at me. This time, I met his gaze directly and smiled. For 12 years, I'd been the trusting wife who believed in our marriage. Now, I was the woman who'd brought down his entire criminal enterprise with patience, intelligence, and the help of professionals who knew how to build an airtight case. Within a week of Stephen's arrest, my divorce attorney filed papers that made his custody dreams impossible. With Stephen facing federal charges and potentially decades in prison, the family court proceedings became a formality. I was awarded temporary full custody of Maya and Connor, along with control of all marital assets that weren't frozen as evidence in the criminal case. The irony was perfect. Stephen had spent over a year moving money and building a case to prove I was an unfit mother, but his own criminal behavior had given me everything he'd tried to take away. The house he'd planned to claim was now mine. The children he'd wanted to steal from me would grow up knowing their father chose greed over family. Looking back at the woman I'd been 3 months ago, worried about my marriage but too afraid to confront the truth, I barely recognized her. Stephen had tried to destroy that woman, but instead, he'd created someone far more dangerous, a mother with nothing left to lose and everything to protect. As I tucked Maya and Connor into bed that night, listening to their laughter and knowing they were safe from Stephen's manipulations, I realized that sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone's own choices destroy them. Stephen had planned my downfall with meticulous care, but his arrogance and greed had ultimately written his own ending. In trying to prove I was too trusting to notice his deception, he'd created the very woman who would bring about his complete destruction.